I swear you'll never see me again. Olivia screamed as she signed the divorce papers, her tears falling onto the trembling words. Nathan Mercer only curved his lips into a cold, dismissive smile. Perfect. One less weakness to protect. 3 years later, his black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided smoothly to a stop in front of the Obsidian Room, the most exclusive and prestigious restaurant in all of Chicago. Nathan adjusted his Audemars Piguet Royal Oak on his wrist, nodding at the valet, who bowed as if standing before a king. At 36, he controlled the most powerful underground empire on the East Coast, a fortune exceeding $500 million, and a reputation that made both politicians and criminals tremble at the mere mention of his name. Tonight, he was here to celebrate the biggest deal of his career with the 26-year-old Victoria's Secret model he'd met last week. Everything was perfect, until a figure approached his table with a bottle of wine in hand. Nathan looked up out of habit to check the label, and in that very moment, his entire world froze. His gold-plated phone slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the marble floor with a sound that echoed like a death knell. Olivia Hayes was standing right in front of him, wearing a wrinkled server's uniform. Those green eyes that once looked at him with unconditional love were now nothing but two exhausted abysses, and the swollen, pregnant belly beneath her apron, probably 7 months along, hit him like a bullet straight to the chest, making his heart, a heart that had remained ice-cold even in the face of death, feel pain for the very first time. What secrets await him? Stay tuned to find out. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and share it with someone who loves a good drama. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Olivia forced herself to steady the tremor in her voice, her lips barely moving before she let out the question she had repeated hundreds of times every night with other guests. Would you like me to open the bottle of wine, sir? Her tone still carried a practiced professionalism, but Nathan could hear every fracture in it, as if she were trying to hold up a wall already beginning to collapse. Nathan parted his lips, meaning to say something, but his throat was dry as a desert and not a single sound would come. For the first time in 20 years of ruling the underworld, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago could not force out one word. They stared at each other in silence. 1,000 days of separation suddenly compressed into a few short seconds, heavy enough to steal the breath from his lungs. Inside Nathan's mind, old images rushed back like floodwater. Olivia on their wedding day, radiant in a white dress worth $50,000, green eyes glittering with happiness as she watched him walk into the aisle. Olivia laughing as he clumsily slid the ring onto her finger. Olivia whispering, "I love you," on their wedding night. Then it all shattered, replaced by the woman standing in front of him now. Pale, gaunt, the dark circles beneath her eyes carved deep, a wrinkled server's uniform, and the round swell of her pregnant belly, taut as a silent accusation. Olivia caught Nathan's gaze settling there. She knew what he was thinking, knew the countless questions drilling through his mind. Whose baby is it? Why is she here? What happened? But this was not the time, not the place to answer any of it. She looked at him with pleading eyes, hoping he would understand. Please, do not make a scene. Not here, not in front of these guests. Not when she needed this job just to survive one more day. Nathan seemed to read the message in her stare. He bent to pick up the phone that had fallen to the floor, but hands that had killed without trembling were now shaking so badly it was humiliating. It took him 3 tries before he managed to grasp it, and he felt as if the entire restaurant were watching. Nathan Mercer, the man who made the whole city cower, now trembling like a child in front of his former wife. Olivia drew a deep breath, fighting to focus on her work. She tilted the bottle and began to pour into Nathan's glass, but her hands would not obey her either. A few drops of dark red wine fell onto the pure white tablecloth, spreading like blood. She froze, watching the stain widen, and all at once she wanted to cry. She had tried so hard to look normal, to reveal nothing at all, and yet she could not even pour a single bottle of wine. "I'm sorry," Olivia whispered, her voice catching. She set the bottle down and started to turn away, to flee the way Nathan's gaze was burning into her. She needed to get out of here right now, before the tears she had held back for so long broke loose in front of him, before she collapsed completely, before he saw just how weak she was. But at the exact moment Olivia was about to step away, at the exact moment Nathan was about to open his mouth and call her name, a bright, ringing laugh burst from the restaurant entrance, cutting through everything like a blade. Megan Sinclair entered the restaurant the way a queen entered her own kingdom. The Versace dress, worth $8,000, hugged her flawless figure, and Hermes Birkin bag swung from her slender arm, and her red-soled Louboutin heels tapped out an even rhythm on the marble floor. Every gaze in the room turned toward her, but Megan saw only one man. "Nathan, I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic tonight was just awful," she said in a bright, clear voice, leaning in to kiss Nathan's cheek before settling into the chair across from him. She didn't notice the air between Nathan and the server standing beside the table, tight enough to choke on, and she didn't catch the frozen look on the face of the man she was dating. Megan flicked her eyes over Olivia from head to toe, letting her gaze pause on the taut swell of the pregnant belly beneath the apron, and her lips curved into a smile that was equal parts pity and contempt. "Oh, you're pregnant, and you still have to work. That must be so hard. How sad for you." Her voice was honeyed, but each word landed like a needle driven straight into Olivia's self-respect. Nathan and Olivia both stayed silent. Nathan thought Olivia would lower her head, would quietly retreat, would let shame swallow her the way he'd seen her fold in the past. But he was wrong. Olivia lifted her chin, and her green eyes flashed with something Nathan had never seen in her before. She smiled, a smile so perfectly polite it didn't tremble once, didn't waver for a heartbeat. "Thank you for your concern," she said evenly, then tilted the wine bottle and poured with smooth, practiced precision into Megan's glass without spilling a single drop. "I hope you have a wonderful dinner." Then she turned and walked away, back straight, head held high, as if Megan's words were nothing more than a breeze passing her ears. Nathan watched her go, and his heart tightened when he saw Olivia place one hand on her lower back, rubbing the aching spot when she thought no one was looking. Even so, she kept moving to the next table, still smiling at guests, still doing her job as if nothing had happened. "Nathan, are you even listening to me?" Megan's voice yanked him back into the present. She was talking about the shopping this afternoon, about the new bag she'd just bought, about a party this weekend at a friend's villa. But Nathan didn't hear any of it. Her lips were moving, yet in his mind there was only Olivia, pale and drawn in a cheap uniform, pregnant with another man's child, serving tables in the very restaurant where he had come to display his wealth. "She's not my problem anymore," Nathan told himself, forcing his attention toward Megan, toward her radiant smile, toward her perfect, untouched beauty. Focus on Megan. Olivia is the past. But all through dinner, no matter what Megan said, no matter how good the food was, no matter how expensive the wine, Nathan's eyes kept searching without meaning to, hunting for Olivia's shape in the room. He saw her carrying heavy trays even with her belly so far along. He saw her pushing a smile onto her face for demanding guests. He saw her wiping sweat from her forehead when she thought no one noticed. Near the end of the meal, Nathan watched Olivia head toward the kitchen. Her walk looked tired, one hand bracing her back, each step weighted down. She disappeared behind the kitchen door, and Nathan felt as if someone had hooked a piece of his heart and dragged it after her. Outside the restaurant, Megan clung to Nathan's arm, pressing her body close. "Come back to your penthouse. I want to end tonight perfectly." She whispered into his ear, her breath hot against his skin. Nathan opened the car door for her, but when Megan reached to pull him in with her, he stopped. "Something urgent just came up," he said, his voice cold and distant. "Not tonight." Megan froze, her eyes darkening. "You're serious? Tonight is the anniversary of your biggest deal." Nathan didn't answer. He only shut the door and tapped the roof to signal the driver. Megan stared at him through the glass, lips pressed tight with anger. Then she slammed the door so hard the Rolls-Royce shuddered. The 3-level penthouse perched atop the tallest building on the Gold Coast sat drowned in darkness. Nathan stood alone before the enormous wall of glass, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, staring down at Chicago glittering with lights below. This city belonged to him. Every street, every shadowed corner, every underground deal lay within his control. And yet tonight, standing inside the empire he had built with blood and bone, Nathan Mercer had never felt so unbearably alone. He let his gaze drift around the penthouse. Furniture worth millions of dollars, works of art by painters known across the world, imported Italian marble beneath his feet. Everything was perfect, expensive, and as cold as a museum. Not a single family photograph on the walls, not one trace of life, not one scrap of warmth beyond the automatic heating system. He had lived like this for 3 years without truly seeing it. Nathan drained his whiskey, feeling the burn slide down his throat. Throughout that time, he had built this empire on the blood of others. He had relentlessly expanded his influence until his very name commanded terror. Everything a man could ever dream of was within his grasp. And yet, so why, when he saw her tonight, In a cheap server's uniform with a pregnant belly stretched tight, did he feel like the poorest man alive? Nathan poured himself another whiskey, his hand shaking slightly. He tried to remember the last time he had felt truly alive. Not when he signed a deal worth $100 million. Not when an enemy knelt at his feet begging. Not when the most beautiful women in the city competed for the privilege of being at his side. The last time he felt alive, truly alive, was when Olivia had still been here. It was the mornings she made coffee for him even though he had his own chef. It was the nights she curled against him, telling him about the paintings she wanted to create. It was the sound of her laughter inside this penthouse, turning it into a home instead of a place to sleep. Then he remembered the last night, the night everything collapsed. Olivia had cried, begging him to give her a daughter. "I want a family with you, Nathan. I want a baby. Someone to love. A reason to live beyond the lavish parties and the lonely nights in this penthouse." And what had he said? "Children are a weakness. Enemies will use them to threaten us. I can't take that risk." But deep down, Nathan knew that wasn't the real reason. He was afraid of becoming his father, a drunk who beat his mother and abandoned him when he was only 8 years old, afraid that the darkness inside him would harm what he loved most. And now the price of that fear was standing right in front of him. Whose baby is it? The question tore through Nathan's mind like a cyclone. Why did she have to work as a server while she was pregnant? Where had the $200,000 he gave her in the divorce gone? That money was enough for her to live comfortably for at least 5 years. And yet now she was carrying heavy trays in a luxury restaurant, serving rich men like him. He let out a bitter laugh, the sound echoing through the empty penthouse like crying. "I refused to give her a daughter. Now she has one with someone else. And me, what do I have? An empire built on blood. A cold penthouse. A young, beautiful lover who only loves my money. And a heart that has been dead for a long time, only now beginning to ache again." The clock hands pointed to 4 a.m. when Nathan lifted his phone and called Thomas, the most trusted right hand he had. Thomas, his voice rough from whiskey and thoughts that would not stop. "Find out everything about Olivia Hayes. Where she's living, what she's doing, who she's with. Before tonight, and don't ask why." The line went silent for a long moment. Nathan knew Thomas was startled, knew this was the first time since their parting he had spoken that name. Finally, Thomas's voice came through, low and steady. "Understood, boss." Nathan ended the call and stared down at the empty glass in his hand. Dawn was beginning to glow at the edge of Chicago's horizon, washing the high-rises in soft pink. A new day was starting, but for Nathan, the long night still had not ended. "What kind of man have I become?" he whispered to himself, his voice swallowed by the emptiness of the penthouse. The next evening, exactly as promised, Thomas showed up at Nathan's penthouse with a thick file in his hand. The 45-year-old man, hair threaded with gray and eyes sharp as blades, had been at Nathan's side for 20 years, loyal as a shadow to its shape. He had never failed a single task Nathan gave him, and this time was no exception. Nathan was standing in front of the familiar wall of glass when Thomas stepped in. He didn't turn around. He only gave a small nod, signaling Thomas to begin. "Olivia Hayes," Thomas said as he opened the file, his voice low and steady. "After the divorce 3 years ago, she used the $200,000 you gave her to open a small art teaching studio in Lincoln Park. At first, things went fairly well. She had about 20 regular students, and she started building a reputation in the local art community." Nathan stayed silent, but his shoulders tightened. "However," Thomas continued, "the studio went bankrupt after 1 year of operation. From what I've been able to investigate, it looks like she ran into severe financial trouble. The entire sum disappeared almost all at once, not because the business failed." Nathan turned, his expression darkening. "Keep going." "After she lost the studio, she found a job as an art teacher at a public elementary school. But 6 months ago, the school cut its budget, and she was one of the first people let go." Thomas flipped to the next page, his voice dropping lower. "Right now, Olivia Hayes is working 2 jobs. During the day, she cleans offices for a company downtown, starting at 5 a.m. until noon. At night, she waits tables at the Obsidian Room, her shift running from 6 p.m. until midnight." Nathan's jaw clenched, his hand tightening until his knuckles went white. 18 hours of work every day, while 7 months pregnant. "Where is she living?" Nathan asked, his voice hissing through his teeth. "A small apartment on the south side," Thomas answered, and even a hardened man like him couldn't fully hide the disgust in his tone. "It's not a safe area. The building's run down. Her apartment is on the 5th floor. No elevator. South side. Nathan knew that neighborhood. It was where he'd grown up before he became a boss, where gunshots at night were as common as breathing, and a person could be killed over the shoes on their feet. And Olivia, the woman who used to live in his $1 million penthouse, was living there now. Alone. Pregnant. "Is there anything else?" Nathan asked. Thomas hesitated before he went on. "Her health is very poor. From what I've gathered, she's overworking and not eating enough. With her pregnancy where it is, that's extremely dangerous." He paused, as if weighing whether he should say more. "And there's one more thing. It looks like someone conned her out of all that money. I'm digging further to find out who it was." Nathan strode forward and snatched the file out of Thomas's hand. Who dared do that to her?" "Not clear yet," Thomas said. "But there's a man who disappeared from her life about 7 or 8 months ago, right around the time she found out she was pregnant. I'm tracking down his identity." Nathan threw the file onto the table, pages scattering. He moved quickly to the closet and pulled out a plain coat, not the expensive suit jacket he usually wore. Thomas stared at him, startled. "Where are you going?" Nathan turned back, his eyes burning with something Thomas had never seen in 20 years. Her apartment address. "Right now. I need to see it with my own eyes." Nathan refused to let Thomas come with him. He didn't drive the Rolls-Royce or any of the luxury cars in his collection either. Instead, he called an ordinary cab, pulled on an old coat he hadn't touched in years, and went alone to the South Side as if he were just a regular man, not the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. When the cab stopped in front of the building Thomas had given him, Nathan understood at once why his subordinate's voice had carried that edge of disgust when he mentioned this place. The building looked like it could collapse at any moment. The brick walls were cracked, the windows were boarded up with rotting planks, and the fire escape was so rusted no one would dare set foot on it. Streetlights flickered, revealing suspicious figures gathered on the corner. Nathan had grown up in neighborhoods like this. He knew exactly what could happen here after midnight, and the thought that Olivia, the woman he had once protected with his entire empire, was now living in the middle of this made him want to smash something. He stepped inside, and the stench of dampness and urine hit him full in the face. The stairwell was pitch dark, no lights at all, and he had to use his phone's flashlight to find his way up to the 5th floor. Each step creaked under his weight like it might break, and he couldn't bear to imagine Olivia, 7 months pregnant, climbing up and down these 5 flights every day. Her apartment was at the end of the 5th floor hallway, the door so thin Nathan could have kicked it in with one blow. He knocked, his heart hammering in his chest. Slow footsteps sounded from inside, then the door cracked open, and Olivia's green eyes went wide when she saw him. How did you find me?" she asked, her voice shaking with shock. Nathan didn't answer. He nudged the door wider and stepped into the apartment, and his heart felt like someone had wrapped a fist around it and squeezed. The place was tiny, maybe only a little bigger than the bathroom in his penthouse. The walls were split with cracks, paint peeling away in large sheets. A plastic bucket sat in the corner, catching water dripping from the ceiling. Nathan crossed to the battered old refrigerator, opened it, and found it nearly empty, holding only a carton of milk and a few shriveled apples. That was all she had to eat. While she was pregnant, while she was carrying another life inside her. Then his eyes caught on the small corner near the window. An old easel, a few unfinished paintings, and paint boxes nearly drained dry. That was all that remained of her dream, of the studio she had built, of the life she had tried to create after leaving him. "What happened to the money I gave you?" Nathan turned back, his voice harsher than he meant it to be. $200,000, Olivia. Where did it all go?" Olivia stood against the wall, one hand supporting her belly, staring at him with empty eyes. Then she laughed, a bitter sound sharp enough to tear the heart. "You want to know? Fine." She lowered herself slowly into the only rickety chair in the room, as if her legs no longer had the strength to hold her. 6 months after the divorce, I met a man named Derek Sullivan. Friends introduced us, said he was a tech entrepreneur, starting a company, full of promise. She paused, eyes fixed on nothing. He was so sweet, Nathan. He said everything I wanted to hear, promised everything I wanted to have, a family, a future, the things you refused to give me. Nathan clenched his jaw but said nothing. He convinced me to invest in his project. He told me it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that the money would multiply tenfold within a year. And I, like a fool, believed him. I gave him everything. Olivia's voice tightened. Then when I found out I was pregnant and told him, Derek Sullivan vanished, along with all the money. Not a goodbye, not a message, not a trace. As if he'd never existed. Nathan stood there, his fists clenched so hard his nails cut into his palms. Rage erupted inside him like a volcano about to blow. Where is he? I'll kill him with my own hands. Olivia lifted her gaze to his, her eyes cold as ice. Don't. I don't need you to kill anyone. I just need to be left in peace. You can't live like this. Nathan stepped closer, his voice almost a plea. Let me help you. Come back to the penthouse with me, or let me rent you a decent apartment. You're pregnant. You need to be taken care of. I'm not a charity project for you to ease your guilt. Olivia rose, facing him with every scrap of pride she had left. You left me 3 years ago, Nathan. You don't get to show up now and play the hero. Nathan looked at her, that thin woman with exhaustion in her eyes but her head still held high, and he realized she had changed. The Olivia he once knew would have cried, would have leaned on him, would have let him fix everything. But the Olivia of now had learned how to stand alone, even if she was standing in the middle of hell. He didn't say anything else. He only took a business card from his wallet and set it on the small table near the door. Anytime, anything. Then he turned and walked out, closing the fragile door behind him. He waited until he reached the first floor before pulling out his phone and calling Thomas. Put someone on her, 24/7. She can't know. He paused, his voice hard as steel. And find me that Derek Sullivan. I want everything on him, everything. 2 weeks passed after the night Nathan went to Olivia's ruined little apartment on the south side. 2 weeks in which he didn't call, didn't text, didn't appear in front of her. He respected what she wanted, respected the pride of the woman who had refused his help. But that didn't mean he left her alone. Every night, at exactly 11 o'clock, Thomas sent him a detailed report about Olivia. She still got up at 4 a.m. to go clean offices. She still worked the night shift at the Obsidian Room until midnight. She still climbed 5 flights of stairs every day with a belly that kept growing heavier. She still ate cheap meals that didn't have enough nourishment for an ordinary person, let alone a pregnant woman. Nathan read those reports every night, and every night he had to choke down the instinct to storm over there, throw her over his shoulder, and haul her back to his penthouse no matter how hard she fought him. But he knew Olivia. Knew she would never forgive him if he did that. So he waited, hoping she would recognize her own limits and reach out to him before it was too late. But the call that came at 2 a.m. on the 14th day wasn't from Olivia. Boss, Thomas's voice came through the phone, unusually urgent. She collapsed at the restaurant. She's at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. It's not good. Nathan couldn't remember what he did over the next 15 minutes. He only knew he lunged out of bed, didn't even have time to change out of his pajamas, didn't have time to comb his hair, only grabbed his coat and ran for the garage. He drove the Rolls-Royce at twice the legal speed, blew through red lights, weaving between cars like a madman. For the first time in his life, Nathan Mercer prayed. He prayed she was all right. He prayed the baby was all right. He prayed he wasn't too late. When he burst into the hospital, still in his pajamas with something wild in his eyes, no one dared stop him. Maybe they knew who he was, or maybe they were simply afraid of the sight of a man standing on the edge of collapse. He found the on-call doctor outside the emergency room and grabbed him by the collar. How is she? How is the baby? The doctor, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, calmly removed Nathan's hand and looked at him with a grave expression. She's severely exhausted, malnourished, anemic. Her body has been pushed beyond its limits for a long time. The fetus is stable right now, but if she keeps living like this, both mother and daughter are at risk. The doctor paused, watching Nathan as if choosing his words. She needs complete rest during the final weeks of the pregnancy. No work, no stress, no stares, proper nutrition, and regular medical monitoring. If not, I can't guarantee anything. Nathan let go of the doctor, stepped up to the glass door of the room, and looked inside. Olivia lay there on the stark white bed, pale as a ghost. IV lines ran into her thin arm, and the monitor displayed her heartbeat and the baby's, both steady, both pulsing on and on. She looked so small, so fragile, as if one hard gust of wind could blow her away. And for the first time in 20 years of conquering the underworld, Nathan Mercer felt real fear. Not fear of enemies, not fear of death, but fear of losing the woman lying behind that pane of glass. Fear that he had let her go for too long. Fear that the pride of them both had pushed her to this edge. She's coming back with me, Nathan said to the doctor, his voice no longer a question but an order, whether she wants to or not. He sat beside Olivia's bed all night, not closing his eyes, only watching her sleep and listening to the steady beep of the monitor. When dawn began to slip through the hospital window, Olivia opened her eyes. She blinked a few times, as if trying to understand where she was. Then her gaze landed on Nathan. He looked terrible, still in his pajamas, eyes bloodshot from being up all night, stubble rough on his jaw from not shaving. He didn't look anything like the powerful mafia boss she used to know. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Nathan took her hand, and this time he didn't allow her to pull away. "This time, you're going to listen to me. Not for me, for the baby." Olivia looked at him, into eyes reddened from a night of worry, at the hand gripping hers, as if he was afraid she might vanish. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she didn't need his pity, wanted to hold on to the last scrap of pride she had left. But she was too tired. Tired from working, tired from worrying, tired from having to be strong alone for so long. And when she looked down at her belly and thought of the little girl growing inside, she knew she no longer had the right to be selfish. Quiet tears slid down Olivia's cheeks as she nodded. The 3-level penthouse on the Gold Coast received Olivia back the way it would receive a stranger. She stood in the middle of the vast living room, looking around at the spotless white walls, the expensive furniture, and the enormous wall of glass that overlooked all of Chicago glittering below. The place was still as luxurious as she remembered, still perfect down to every detail, and still as cold as a museum. There was no warmth of a home, only a display of power and money. Nathan had prepared everything for her before she was discharged. A private room on the 2nd floor with a soft bed, brand new sheets and pillows, and a window facing Lake Michigan. A private nurse on duty 24/7 to monitor her health and the baby's. A personal chef to cook balanced, nourishing meals, according to the doctor's orders. And one of Chicago's top obstetricians, ready to come examine her anytime she needed. Olivia accepted all of it in silence. She didn't thank him too much, and she didn't argue. She simply took it, because she knew she had no other choice, because the daughter inside her needed these things. The first week passed in cool distance. Olivia kept space between herself and Nathan, as if he were a stranger letting her stay out of charity. She said only 2 sentences to him each day. "Thank you," when he asked if she needed anything, and "good night," before she closed her bedroom door. Nothing more. They ate dinner together every day, sitting across from each other at a long table that could seat 12, and the silence between them was heavy enough to cut with a knife. Nathan didn't know what to say. He, the man who could make an entire city shake with a single sentence, couldn't find words for the woman sitting less than 2 meters away. But there was one thing Olivia noticed, even though she didn't say it out loud. Nathan came home earlier. Every day, at exactly 7 in the evening, he was in the penthouse, ready for dinner. She knew it was unusual. During the 2 years of their marriage, Nathan rarely came home before 10 at night, and there were nights he didn't come home at all. But now he was here, every day, on the dot, as if nothing mattered more than sitting across from her in silence. The 2nd week began with an evening sunset. Olivia was sitting on the balcony, where she had asked Nathan to let her bring her old easel back from the South Side apartment. She was painting, a landscape of Chicago at sunset, with the high-rises stained red by the dying light. She didn't know Nathan was standing behind her, didn't know how long he'd been there, only watching her paint in silence. He watched her brushstrokes, the concentration on her face, the gentle beauty that came over her when she disappeared into her passion. And he remembered why he'd fallen in love with her 3 years ago, the first time he saw her painting in a small gallery in Lincoln Park. "You could sit down instead of standing there like a stalker." Olivia's voice broke the quiet, and Nathan startled. She still didn't turn around, still kept painting. But he could hear something in her tone he hadn't heard in 2 weeks. A trace of humor, a hint of warmth. Nathan sat in the chair beside her, and for the first time since she'd returned to the penthouse, they both laughed. Not loud laughter, only small, awkward sounds, like 2 strangers beginning to learn each other. But it was a beginning. From then on, they started talking. Small things at first. "The weather is so beautiful today. The chef's salmon is really good. Who are you going to give this painting to?" Then, little by little, the conversations grew deeper. One night, when they were sitting on the balcony after dinner, Olivia suddenly asked about his work. Not the legal work, but the underworld he controlled. Nathan hesitated, unsure whether he should tell the truth, but then he decided to. He told her what he'd done, the people he'd had to handle, the decisions he'd had to make. He didn't dress it up, he didn't justify it, he simply told the truth. When he finished, he waited for disgust, for fear, or at least disappointment in her eyes. But Olivia only looked at him with calm steadiness. "I already knew," she said. "Since the 2nd year of our marriage." Nathan went still. "You knew and you stayed." Olivia looked out into the distance, where Chicago's lights flickered like a carpet of stars beneath their feet. "I loved you. Not your work, but you never understood the difference." Nathan fell silent for a long time, her words hitting him like bullets straight through the chest. She had known everything and still stayed by him, still loved him, until he pushed her away for an entirely different reason. "I was a fool," Nathan finally said, his voice low and full of regret. "I know that now." One weekend afternoon, Olivia was sitting on the sofa reading when she heard the elevator doors open. She looked up and saw Nathan walk in, but he wasn't alone. 3 men in uniform followed behind him, each carrying large boxes, paper bags stuffed to the brim, and all kinds of items she couldn't identify at first glance. Nathan motioned for them to set everything down in the living room, then leave. And when the elevator doors closed again, Olivia could finally see what he'd brought home. Baby clothes, toys, a crib made of spotless white oak, a stroller, a high chair, a baby carrier, a bottle warmer, a bottle sterilizer, and many other things she didn't even know the names for. Everything piled up in the living room like a miniature baby store. "I didn't know what you needed to buy," Nathan said, his voice carrying a rare trace of awkwardness as she stared at him in disbelief. "So, I bought it all." Olivia looked at the mountain of supplies, then at Nathan, then back at the mountain again, and she laughed. Not the polite smile she'd been wearing for weeks, but real laughter, rising from deep in her chest, the kind of laughter she thought she'd forgotten how to make. Nathan stood there watching her laugh, and he realized this was the first time he'd heard that sound in his penthouse for far too long. Together they started sorting through everything, opening boxes one by one, folding tiny outfits, assembling the crib with instructions neither of them understood. Nathan, a man who could run an entire underground empire, was now struggling with a screw no bigger than his pinky finger, and Olivia had to take his hand and show him how to do it. The moment her hand touched his, they both went quiet. Neither of them pulled away. That night, after dinner, they sat on the balcony looking out at the city. The air between them had changed, no longer tense and distant the way it had been. "There's something I never told you," Nathan said suddenly, his voice low and far away. "About the real reason I didn't want children." Olivia stayed silent and waited, knowing this was what he needed to say, and what she needed to hear. "My father was an alcoholic," Nathan began, his eyes fixed on nothing. "He hit my mother, hit me, every time he got drunk. I still remember nights hiding in the closet, hands over my ears, so I wouldn't have to hear my mother crying." He stopped and drew a deep breath. "When I was 8, my mother left. No goodbye, no note. One morning I woke up and she was gone, leaving me alone with that drunk." Nathan's voice caught. "I lived on the streets from the time I was 14. After my father got so drunk he nearly killed me. I joined a gang to survive, to have food, to have somewhere to sleep, and I spent my whole life building power so I'd never have to be afraid again." He turned to Olivia, his eyes full of old wounds. "I was afraid to have a daughter because I was afraid I'd become my father. I was afraid the darkness in me would hurt what I loved most. I was afraid that if I had a daughter, I'd destroy it the way my father destroyed me." Olivia lifted her hand and touched his face, feeling the hard lines of him, and underneath them a child who was still afraid. "You're not your father, Nathan," she said gently. "You never were. You chose a different path. You became someone else. That fear doesn't define you." Nathan closed his eyes, and Olivia felt him tremble under her palm. Then he opened them and looked down at her belly. "Maybe he faltered. Olivia nodded, took his hand, and placed it on her belly. They sat there in silence and waited. And then it happened. A light kick from inside. Nathan's eyes went wide, stunned like a child seeing magic for the first time. It kicked. "She likes your voice," Olivia smiled. "She?" Nathan looked at her. "It's a girl. I was going to tell you when." She didn't finish, but they both understood. Nathan bent down, brought his lips close to her belly, and whispered, "Hey, little girl, I'll protect you. Both of you. I promise." Then he stood, pulled out his phone, and stepped to the side. Olivia heard him speak a few short, cold words, then end the call. "What did you just do?" she asked when he came back. Nathan looked at her, his gaze steady. "I choose you. I always choose you." Rumors spread through Chicago's upper crust and its underworld like fire racing across dry ground. Nathan Mercer, the city's most powerful single mafia boss, suddenly had a woman living in his penthouse. Not the models or actresses he cycled through so often, but a pregnant woman, guarded 24/7, and treated by him as if she were a treasure. People whispered that she was his ex-wife. People whispered that he had sent Megan Sinclair away, the Victoria's Secret model everyone thought would become the next Mrs. Mercer. People whispered 1,000 things, and among those who heard them, one man listened with special interest. Derek Sullivan sat in a cheap motel room on the outskirts of Chicago, counting the last dollars in his wallet. The $200,000 he had conned from Olivia had evaporated long ago, burned on gambling, booze, and nights of reckless indulgence. He had planned to slip into another state and find a new target, and then he heard this. Olivia Hayes, the foolish woman he had abandoned when she told him she was pregnant, was now living in Nathan Mercer's penthouse, a mafia boss, a billionaire, and most important, the man caring for the daughter who, biologically, belonged to Derek. Derek smiled, the smile of a snake that had just spotted prey. He might not be able to match Nathan Mercer in the underworld, but he had something Nathan didn't: the legal rights of a biological father. That afternoon, while Nathan was in a meeting with his associates, Derek appeared at the building. He looked different from 8 months earlier, when he vanished. Thinner, more worn down, his suit old and wrinkled. But he still carried the slick confidence of a professional con man. 2 of Nathan's guards stopped him in the lobby. "You're not on the approved guest list," one of them said, his voice hard as steel. Derek didn't even flinch. "I'm the father of the baby she's carrying," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Do you want to explain to your boss why you blocked me from seeing my own daughter?" The guards exchanged a look, unsure what to do. Finally, one pulled out his phone and called up to the penthouse, reporting the situation to Olivia. Olivia stood in the living room with the phone pressed to her ear, and she felt the blood in her veins turn to ice when she heard that name. Derek Sullivan. The man who had deceived her, abandoned her, left her to face the pregnancy and the ruin alone. He was here. After a moment of thought, she decided to go down to meet him. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed to know what he wanted. She needed to face the devil from her past. When the elevator doors opened and Olivia stepped into the lobby, Derek was there, waiting with the smile that had once made her trust him, that had once made her give him everything. Now that smile only made her want to vomit. "Baby." Derek stepped closer, his voice sweet in a way that was almost theatrical. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I want to come back. I want to be the baby's father. I want to take care of you and our daughter." Olivia stood still, looking at him with eyes as cold as ice. She wasn't the Olivia from 8 months ago, naive and easy to fool. She had walked through hell and come back, and she wasn't afraid of men like him anymore. "You disappeared when I needed you most," she said, her voice strangely calm. "Don't pretend now." Derek's smile faltered for a second, then he quickly recovered his display of regret, but his eyes began to show what he really was. Sweeping the luxurious lobby, taking in the expensive paintings on the walls, the crystal chandelier, the gleaming marble floor. "Who do you think you are now?" His voice changed abruptly, turning cold and threatening. "Living with a mafia boss? Climbing into his bed in exchange for this lavish life? The baby in your belly is my daughter. The law is on my side." Olivia didn't step back, even though her heart was hammering. "You don't have any right to this baby. You abandoned us." "Oh, but the court won't see it that way." Derek took another step, his voice dripping venom. "A mafia boss with blood on his hands, or a biological father who wants to reunite with his daughter. Who do you think the judge will choose?" He paused, then smiled, cruel and sharp. "You've got 2 choices. 1, you leave here. You come with me, and we start over. 2, I sue for custody, and I promise you, I'll win. Choose." Olivia felt her legs begin to tremble, but she didn't let him see it. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling her little girl move inside as if she were lending her strength. "Get out," Olivia said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Right now." Derek looked at her, then laughed. "See you in court, baby." He turned and walked out, leaving Olivia standing there alone. She wrapped both arms around her belly, feeling fear spread through every cell of her body. But she didn't cry. She'd cried enough. Nathan returned to the penthouse just as the sun was setting. He stepped out of the elevator in a good mood after a successful meeting, but the smile on his mouth vanished the instant he saw the 2 guards standing at attention. waiting for him with tense faces. They reported everything, from Derek showing up and demanding to see Olivia, to the threats he spat out before he left. Nathan stood there listening, and every word was oil poured onto flame. When the last guard finished, Nathan grabbed the glass of liquor on the table and hurled it straight into the wall. The crash of shattering glass rang through the penthouse, sharp and furious. "He came here?" Nathan roared, his voice booming like thunder. His eyes darkened, and in that moment, he was no longer the gentle man who had sat beside Olivia every night for weeks. He was Nathan Mercer, the mafia boss, the man who had killed more than a few people with his own hands. "I'll kill him. I'll tear him apart piece by piece." "Nathan!" Olivia's voice rose from the staircase. She came down, one hand supporting her belly, her face tight with worry. "Don't kill him. If you go to prison, what happens to me and the baby?" Nathan turned to her, and the rage in his eyes began to soften when he saw the fear on her face. She wasn't afraid of Derek. She was afraid of losing him. He drew a deep breath, forcing himself to rein in the fury boiling through his veins. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice still shaking from the effort of holding back. "A different way." The following week, Derek made his move officially. One morning, Nathan's lawyer delivered a thick stack of documents. Derek Sullivan had filed a petition in family court, seeking custody rights over the baby Olivia was carrying. He'd hired a mid-tier law firm, but one smart enough to know exactly how to exploit an opponent's weakness. And Derek didn't stop there. He played dirty. He contacted the press, casting himself as a remorseful father being kept from his daughter by a brutal mafia boss. Sensational headlines began appearing in tabloid papers. "Mafia boss steals another man's wife and daughter. Desperate father fights to reclaim his baby from a criminal. A love tragedy. Young woman held captive in a billionaire's penthouse." Nathan summoned his own counsel. Margaret Chen, an Asian woman in her 50s with eyes sharp as knives and a reputation as one of Chicago's best family attorneys. The meeting took place in Nathan's office on the top floor of the building, and Margaret didn't waste time. "Mr. Mercer, I'll be blunt," she said, her voice firm. "Courts don't like criminals. If they dig into your work, if they uncover what you've done, then even if the baby isn't biologically yours, they can still use that against Miss Hayes because she's living with you." Nathan clenched his teeth. "Do whatever it takes. Money's not an issue." Margaret shook her head. "This isn't about money, Mr. Mercer. It's about reputation. And Derek Sullivan's lawyers know that. They'll exploit every dark corner of your life to prove that Miss Hayes' living situation isn't fit for raising a daughter." That night, Olivia didn't come down for dinner. Nathan found her in her room, sitting on the bed, holding her belly and crying. She'd read the articles, she'd imagined the worst case, and the fear of losing her daughter was crushing her from the inside. Nathan didn't say anything. He simply walked in, sat beside her, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. She let him hold her, let the tears fall, let the fear spill out after days of forcing it down. "That baby isn't yours," Olivia whispered through sobs. "Why are you doing all of this?" Nathan tightened his arms around her, feeling her fragile body trembling against him. "Because I love you," he said, his voice soft as breath but steady as a vow. "I never stopped loving you, not for a single day since the day she walked out." Olivia turned to look at him, eyes red from crying, and she saw in his gaze something she thought had been gone for a long time. Love, honest and fierce, the way it had been when they first met. Nathan lifted a hand and wiped the tears from her cheek, then bent down and kissed her. Their first kiss, after a lifetime of longing and regret. Full of tears, full of sorrow, and yet full of hope. When they broke apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "I won't let anyone take her from you. I swear it on my life." Nathan wasn't the kind of man who sat still and waited for fate to decide. In the 2 weeks since Derek filed the petition, Nathan had unleashed his entire underground network to dig into the bastard's past. Thomas led the investigation, a team of 12 men spread across multiple states, tearing through every record, every trace Derek Sullivan had ever left behind. Nathan spent hundreds of thousands of dollars buying information, bribing bank employees, hiring private investigators, even reaching out to underworld contacts in other states to chase down leads. He didn't care about money. He cared about protecting Olivia and the little girl she was carrying. 1 week before the court date, Thomas walked into Nathan's office with a file thicker than any Nathan had ever seen. Thomas's eyes held something rare for a man so quiet, a sharp gleam of satisfaction. "You're going to want to hear this," Thomas said, setting the file on the desk and opening the first page. Derek Sullivan isn't his real name. Nathan straightened, his gaze turning razor sharp. Go on. His real name is Ryan Mitchell, born in Houston, Texas, 41 years old. Not 32 like he claimed to Olivia. Thomas flipped to the next page, where a police booking photo stared back. He has a record in 3 states, California, Arizona, and Nevada. Charges include fraud and embezzlement. He did 2 years in California for taking money from a wealthy widow. Nathan stared at the photo, at the face of the man who had conned Olivia, and rage flared in him again. But this time it was held in check by the cold focus of a man holding a winning card. What else? We found at least 5 other women he scammed with the same pattern, Thomas continued. He plays the successful businessman, targets single women or women who've just been through something, romances them, talks sweet, convinces them to invest, then disappears. 3 of those 5 women have agreed to testify against him in court. Nathan nodded, but he knew Thomas was saving the most important part for last. He could see it in the look of his loyal right hand. And the best part, Thomas smiled, a rare sight on a face that was usually stone. Ryan Mitchell is still legally married in Texas. He's never divorced. And he has 2 children with that wife, one 8 years old and one 5. Nathan shot to his feet. He has a wife. He does. We have photos of him with his wife and kids, taken 6 months ago at a birthday party in Houston. We also have records of Olivia's transfer to his offshore account, and a statement from his wife confirming he's often away for work. Thomas placed a thick stack of documents on the desk. Court records from 3 states, statements from 3 victims ready to testify, bank records, and proof of his legal marriage. It's all here. Nathan looked at the pile of paper, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not the warm smile he gave Olivia, but the cold smile of a predator that had just driven its prey into a corner. He wants to play the law game. I'll show him how the law is played. He picked up his phone and called Margaret Chen. She answered on the second ring, her voice still sharp even though it was close to midnight. I've got everything you need, Nathan said, confidence flooding his voice. The confidence he'd lost since Derek appeared. Derek Sullivan is finished. The night before the court hearing, the penthouse was filled with something Nathan hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. He and Olivia sat close together on the sofa, going over the documents one last time that Margaret Chen had prepared, the evidence that would strip away Derek Sullivan's mask. Or rather, Ryan Mitchell's. Everything was ready. Tomorrow, that con man would pay for what he'd done. Tomorrow, it'll all end, Olivia said, one hand resting on her belly. Now close to 9 months, her voice gentle and full of hope. We'll be free. Nathan looked at her, the woman who had walked through hell and still stood upright, and his heart swelled with love. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, his mouth lingering on her warm skin. That's right. And then we'll start our real life together. Right then, Nathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, saw Thomas's name, and a flicker of worry passed through his eyes. Thomas never called at this hour unless it was urgent. Boss, Thomas said, his voice unusually tight. There's a serious problem with the shipment at the port. Our people got blocked, and if you don't handle it right now, we could lose both the cargo and some men. Nathan looked at Olivia, hesitation written across his face. He didn't want to leave her. Not tonight. Not when they were so close to the finish line. Go, Olivia said, reading him easily. I'm fine. Security's here. I'll sleep before you even get back. Nathan still hesitated, but he knew this wasn't something he could ignore. His men were in danger, and he was the only one who could fix it. I'll be back within 2 hours, he said as he stood, bending to kiss her again. Lock your bedroom door and don't open it for anyone but me. Olivia nodded, smiling to steady him. I love you. I love you too. And Nathan stepped into the elevator, not knowing that would be the last time he'd see that smile on her lips. Derek Sullivan knew everything. He had someone inside Nathan's team, a greedy guard who had sold information for $50,000. Derek knew about the evidence, knew that tomorrow he'd be exposed, knew he wouldn't just lose the case. He could end up back in prison for years. And if he had to fall into hell, he wasn't going alone. He hired 3 thugs, men willing to do anything for the right price. The planted guard slipped sedatives into the coffee of the 2 other guards, and when Nathan had been gone from the building for 15 minutes, both men slumped unconscious. Derek and the thugs walked into the penthouse as if it belonged to them. Olivia was in the bedroom, getting ready for sleep, when she heard unfamiliar footsteps. She stood, stepped into the hallway, and the blood in her veins turned to ice when she saw Derek at the top of the stairs, a poisonous smile on his mouth. "Hello, baby," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Miss me?" Olivia backed away, one arm wrapping around her belly as if she could shield the daughter inside her. "What are you doing here? Where are the guards?" "They're sleeping soundly." Derek moved toward her, each step slow and threatening. "And your boss is busy dealing with a problem I arranged." Olivia wanted to run, but she was almost 9 months pregnant, her body heavy and slow. She retreated toward the stairs, hoping she could get down, find a way out. "Tomorrow it all ends," Derek said, bitterness thick in his voice. "I go to prison, I lose everything, while you and that mafia bastard live happily ever after? Not a chance." He stopped right in front of her, his eyes wild. "If I can't have that baby, then no one gets to." Olivia saw his hand rise, but she didn't have time to react. Derek shoved her hard, and she fell backward toward the stairs. She reached for the railing, tried to grab it, but her fingers slipped. Then she tumbled down, step after step slamming into her body, into her belly, the sound of bones striking hard wood mixing with her scream of pain. When she came to a stop at the bottom, she wasn't screaming anymore. She lay still as blood began to spread beneath her. Nathan came back to the penthouse 2 hours later, just as he'd promised. But the moment the elevator doors opened, he knew something was wrong. The 2 guards were sprawled unconscious on the floor, the penthouse door wide open. "Olivia," he roared, charging inside. Then he saw blood on the stairs, drop after drop after drop, leading down to the bottom like a road into death. And there, at the foot of the staircase, Olivia lay motionless, eyes squeezed shut, blood pooling beneath her. Nathan let out a scream that didn't sound human. He plunged down, gathered her up, felt her body cold in his arms. "No, no, no," he muttered like a madman, lifting her and running for the elevator. He called Thomas as he tore down to the garage. "Find him. Alive or dead, I don't care." In the car racing toward the hospital at a terrifying speed, Nathan gripped Olivia's blood-slick hand, tears streaming down the face of a mafia boss who had never cried. "Don't leave me. Do you hear me? Don't leave me." The car tore into the emergency bay of Northwestern Memorial Hospital at a terrifying speed, tires screaming against the pavement as Nathan slammed the brakes. He carried Olivia in his arms and stormed inside like a hurricane, shouting for a doctor. The nurses and the night staff took one look and moved fast, lifting Olivia onto a gurney and rushing her into the emergency room. Nathan ran after them, unwilling to be away from her for even a second. But when the emergency doors swung shut, 2 hospital security guards blocked his path. "You can't go in there, sir. Please let the doctors work." Nathan roared, shoving at them, trying to force his way through. "That's my wife. You can't stop me." It took 3 more guards to hold him back, and in that moment Thomas appeared. He had driven after Nathan the instant he got the call, and now he stood in front of his boss and put both hands on Nathan's shoulders. "Let them work, boss. Let them work." Thomas's voice was low and steady, an anchor keeping Nathan from sinking into madness. Nathan looked at Thomas, then at the emergency room door sealed tight, and suddenly his legs gave out. He dropped, knees hitting the hospital's cold floor, and for the first time in all his 36 years, Nathan Mercer prayed. "God, if you're real," he whispered, his voice shaking and desperate. "Take anything from me. Money, power, my empire, my life. Just not them, not her, not the baby." Thomas stood beside him in silence, seeing his boss this broken for the first time. He didn't speak. He only stayed there like a wall, shielding Nathan from the curious looks of people passing by. Time moved like torture. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Nathan sat in a plastic chair in the hospital corridor, hollow-eyed, staring at the emergency room doors that remained closed and silent. Thomas brought coffee, but Nathan didn't touch it. He couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't do anything but wait and pray. How many people had he killed with these hands? How many families had he ruined while building his empire? Was this punishment? Was the universe taking back what he had stolen from others? When the emergency room doors finally opened and the surgeon stepped out, Nathan sprang up like a coiled wire. He searched the doctor's eyes, trying to read the answer before a word was spoken. "Mr. Mercer," the doctor said, his voice worn from hours in the operating room. "We saved her. She'll recover physically." Nathan exhaled, legs nearly buckling again with relief. "She's alive. Olivia is alive." But the doctor wasn't finished. He stopped, and his eyes darkened, filled with regret and grief. But the baby. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could. The trauma was too severe. The baby didn't make it. Silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the whole world had just collapsed. Nathan stood there staring at the doctor, his mind refusing to process what he'd heard. The baby. Their daughter. The daughter he'd sworn to protect. The daughter who had kicked against his hand as if greeting him. The daughter he'd whispered promises to in the deep hours of night. Gone. And then it hit. The pain. The pain like someone tearing his chest open and crushing the heart inside. Nathan Mercer, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, a man who had faced death more times than he could count without trembling, broke down sobbing. Not quiet tears, but a raw, screaming grief, the sound of a child who has lost everything. Thomas steadied him, and when Nathan was calm enough to move, Thomas led him to Olivia's room. She lay there, pale as paper, eyes closed, ivy lines running into her thin arm. When she opened her eyes and saw Nathan, the first thing she asked about was the baby. My baby. Where is my baby? Her voice was hoarse and weak. Nathan couldn't speak. He only stood there, tears streaming down his face, and he shook his head. Olivia looked at him, and in that moment she understood. She understood everything without a single explanation. No! She screamed, the sound ripping through the air in the hospital room. No, my baby, my little girl. She tried to sit up, tried to fight her way out of the bed, as if she could run to find her daughter, as if the baby were only lost somewhere and she could still bring her home. The nurses rushed in to hold her, and Olivia pounded her fists against the bed, against anything she could reach, while her desperate sobs echoed down the hospital hallway. Nathan climbed onto the bed and gathered her into his arms, letting her hit his chest, letting her scream into him, letting her pour out a pain no language on earth could ever hold. They clung to each other and cried, two broken pieces of the same shattered heart, in the longest night of their lives. When the sobbing finally eased, when Olivia was so exhausted she had no tears left, she whispered into Nathan's chest, her voice small and cracked like a child's. I didn't even get to name her. 3 days had passed since that horrific night. 3 days in which Nathan didn't leave the hospital, didn't sleep, didn't eat, only sat beside Olivia's bed and watched her lie there, eyes empty, as she stared at the ceiling. She didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't react to anything at all. As if her soul had died with the little girl she never even got to meet. Nathan had tried to talk to her, tried to comfort her, tried to do anything that might pull her back, but Olivia only lay there, a body without a spirit, and Nathan felt like he was losing her one piece at a time. When his phone buzzed on the afternoon of the 3rd day, he almost didn't answer, but then he saw Thomas's name on the screen, and something inside him flared awake. We found him, Thomas's voice said, cold and solid. A cheap motel in the outskirts. Our men have it surrounded. He can't run anywhere now. Nathan looked at Olivia. She was sleeping, or at least her eyes were closed. He stood, bent down, and kissed her forehead, his mouth lingering against her cold skin. I'll come back, he whispered, even though he knew she wouldn't hear him. Then he stepped out of the hospital room, and when the door closed behind him, his eyes had changed. No longer the grieving man who sat beside his wife's bed. This was Nathan Mercer, the mafia boss, a man going to collect a debt paid in blood. The motel where Derek was hiding was a run-down 2-story building in the suburbs of Chicago, the kind of place where people paid cash and nobody asked names. By the time Nathan arrived, Thomas and 10 of his men had locked down the entire area. Not even a fly could slip out without being seen. He's in room 12, 2nd floor, Thomas reported. Alone. Do you want us to go in first? Nathan shook his head. I'm going in alone. Thomas said nothing, only nodded and signaled his men to hold their positions. He knew his boss well, knew this was personal, something Nathan had to handle himself. Nathan climbed the stairs, each step thudding on rotting wood. The gun in his coat pocket felt heavy, like a promise of death waiting for the man who had destroyed his life. He stopped at the door to room 12, then kicked it hard. The door burst open, and Nathan walked in. Derek, or rather Ryan Mitchell, was curled in the corner like a rat trapped with nowhere left to go. His face was chalk white, his eyes wide with terror as he watched Nathan step inside. The room reeked of alcohol and sweat, littered with empty bottles and discarded fast food boxes. For the past 3 days he had been hiding here, drinking and waiting, knowing Nathan would find him sooner or later. Nathan shut the door, drew his gun slowly, and moved forward one measured step at a time. Each footfall sounded like a countdown to the end of the world. Please. Derek dropped to his knees, tears and mucus running down his face. I didn't mean it. I only wanted to scare her. I didn't know. Nathan didn't speak. He kept walking until the barrel of the gun touched Derek's forehead. You killed my daughter, Nathan said, his voice ice cold. An innocent baby. She never even got to see the sunlight. Derek sobbed, begged, promised everything. He said he'd make it up. He'd disappear. He'd do anything Nathan wanted. But Nathan didn't hear a single word. In his mind, there was only Olivia at the foot of the stairs, blood spreading beneath her. His finger tightened on the trigger. Just a little more pressure, and Derek's head would burst like a melon. He wanted to do it. Every cell in his body was screaming for blood, for revenge, for justice, for the daughter he never got to hold. But then he thought of Olivia. If he killed Derek, he'd go to prison. And she would lose him too, after losing their daughter. She had already walked through too much suffering. He couldn't leave her alone again. Nathan lowered the gun, breathing hard as if he'd just run a marathon. Death is too easy for you, he said, his voice shaking from the effort of restraint. You're going to rot in prison. Every day, day after day, until you die old in there. He turned away, pulled out his phone, and called the police. When they arrived, he handed over every piece of evidence. A deadly assault on the fetus, federal fraud across multiple states, trespassing, assault. The list of charges was so long Derek would never see the light of day as a free man again. As the police cuffed Derek and dragged him out, Derek screamed at Nathan, "You'll regret this. Do you hear me? You'll regret this." Nathan turned his back and walked out of the filthy room, out into the late afternoon sunlight. No. You're the one who's going to regret it. 2 weeks after the tragedy, Olivia was discharged and brought back to the penthouse. But the woman who stepped out of the elevator that day was no longer the Olivia Nathan had known. She moved like a body without a soul, her eyes empty of light, drifting through the vast penthouse like a ghost. She didn't eat, even when Nathan hired a chef to cook the dishes she used to love. She didn't speak, no matter how hard Nathan tried to start a conversation. She only lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, day after day after day. Nathan hired a therapist, but Olivia refused to see them. He brought books. She never opened them. He played music. She didn't react. It was as if she were sinking deeper into an abyss he couldn't reach, and that terrified Nathan more than anything he had ever faced in his life. He didn't leave the penthouse, didn't care about work, didn't meet anyone. He only stayed there, beside her, no matter how many times she pushed him away. One night, around 3 a.m, Nathan jerked awake and found the space beside him empty. His heart slammed against his ribs, a primal fear surging as he bolted out of bed to look for her. He found Olivia on the balcony, staring down at Chicago asleep beneath its glittering lights. The night wind was cold, but she wore only a thin nightgown, as if she could no longer feel temperature at all. Nathan stepped out and stood beside her without speaking. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to heal a wound that might never fully heal. I lost my baby. Olivia finally spoke, her voice hollow as a pit. I have nothing left. Sometimes I think it'd be easier if I didn't have to wake up every morning. Nathan felt his heart break all over again at those words. He moved in and wrapped his arms around her from behind, holding her tight as if he were afraid she might drift away. You still have me, he whispered into her ear, his voice shaking with pain. You'll always have me. She didn't react, but he didn't let go. She loved you, Nathan went on, tears beginning to slide down his cheeks. She'd want her mother to live, to be happy. She wouldn't want you like this. Olivia trembled in his arms, and Nathan knew she was crying even without a sob. You can hate the whole world. You can hate me. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'll always be here. He led her back inside, wrapped a blanket around her, and sat with her all night, not sleeping, only holding her and letting her cry until she finally went limp with exhaustion and fell asleep in his arms. In the weeks that followed, Nathan didn't give up. Every day he stayed beside Olivia, even when she pushed him away, even when she was silent, even when she looked at him with those empty eyes. He cooked for her, even though what he made usually came out scorched or bland. He read to her, art books she used to love. He played music, the classical pieces she used to listen to when she painted. He didn't force her to talk, didn't force her to eat, didn't force her to do anything. He simply stayed there, like a solid wall she could lean against when she was ready. 6 weeks after the tragedy, late one afternoon, Nathan was sitting in the living room reading the work reports Thomas had been sending when he heard a sound from the studio. He stood, walked over, and his heart stuttered when he saw what was in front of him. Olivia was standing at the easel that had sat under dust for weeks. In her hand was a brush, and on the canvas in front of her were the first strokes of a painting. She was painting a baby, a little girl with green eyes like her mother's, soft brown hair, and an angel's smile. The daughter she had never been allowed to meet, but would carry in her heart forever. Nathan stood there, tears streaming down his face, but his mouth lifted into a smile. For the first time in 6 weeks, Olivia had gotten up on her own and done something. It was the first sign she was trying to live again. He didn't step in, didn't interrupt her. He only stood there, watching her paint, silently thanking whatever force had pulled her back from the edge. That night, Thomas called with news. Derek Sullivan, or Ryan Mitchell, had been sentenced 25 years to life, based on combined charges across multiple states: deadly assault, federal fraud, trespassing, assault. He would grow old and die in prison, never able to hurt anyone again. Nathan heard it and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, only emptiness. Because no matter how harsh Derek's punishment was, it wouldn't bring their daughter back. But when Nathan went back to the studio and saw Olivia still standing there, adding new strokes to the painting of their little girl, he knew they would make it through. Not by forgetting, but by learning how to live with the pain. When Olivia set the brush down and turned, she saw Nathan in the doorway. For the first time in weeks, her eyes weren't completely empty anymore. Something small was returning, a thin spark in the darkness. She walked to him, took his hand, and her voice, though still weak, carried a faint warmth again. "I'm ready to try, to keep living, with you." 3 months after the tragedy, when Olivia had started eating again and could sometimes manage a small smile, Nathan sat alone on the penthouse balcony late one night and thought about his life. He looked down at Chicago, the city he'd ruled for 20 years, and for the first time he didn't feel pride. He only felt tired. It was the underworld that had indirectly caused this tragedy. Derek learned Olivia was living with a wealthy mafia boss, and greed woke up in him. He wanted leverage, wanted money, wanted a lawsuit that could squeeze out whatever it could. And when everything collapsed, he took revenge in the cruelest way he could. But Derek wasn't Nathan's only enemy. There were dozens, hundreds of men out there, waiting for a chance to bring him down. And now they knew he had a weakness, a woman he loved more than his own life. Olivia would always be a target, a potential hostage, a way for enemies to strike at him. If he truly wanted to protect her, he had to leave the darkness. A week later, Nathan summoned all his lieutenants and allies to a secret meeting. They came from everywhere, powerful men of the underworld, men who'd followed him for years, men who had helped him build this empire from nothing. And he told them something no one expected. "I'm stepping back. From all of it." Silence swallowed the room, then whispers, doubtful looks, questions that never quite formed. Nathan Mercer, the most powerful boss in Chicago, was walking away from everything. "Thomas will run things in my place," Nathan continued, his voice steady. "All underground operations will belong to him. I'll keep only the legitimate businesses, the clubs, the hotels, the real estate. The rest, I'm not involved anymore." Thomas looked at him, the eyes of the man who'd been loyal for 20 years, shining with emotion. He didn't speak, only nodded, a nod that carried a promise he would shoulder the weight. 2 weeks later, Nathan sold the Gold Coast penthouse, the 3-level penthouse he'd lived in for 10 years, where he'd built an empire, where he'd lost the daughter who never got to be born. He sold it without regret, because every corner of that place held painful memories. He bought a new house in Vermont, hundreds of miles from Chicago. Not a lavish estate, just a normal family home with 3 bedrooms, a small yard, and a view of a clear blue lake, near a school, near a grocery store, near the ordinary things Nathan had never had in his life. A house meant for living, not for showing off. The day they moved into the new house, everything was still a mess. Cardboard boxes stacked through the living room, furniture not yet arranged, curtains not yet hung. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the windows and painted the polished wood floor, and Olivia stood in the middle of it all, looking around with curious eyes like a child discovering a new world. Nathan came up behind her, and when she turned, she saw him kneeling. In his hand was a small box, and inside it was a ring, not the $1 million diamond he'd given her the first time he proposed, just a simple silver band with a small stone that caught the light. "Last time, I gave you the whole world, but I didn't give you my heart, Nathan said, his voice trembling. This time, I only have my heart. Will you take it? Olivia looked at him, at the ring, at the ordinary house around them, and tears began to fall. But these weren't the tears of misery from the weeks before. These were tears of happiness, tears of hope, tears of someone finding a reason to live again. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Nathan slid the ring onto her finger, then rose and kissed her. They stood there among the cardboard boxes and scattered belongings, late afternoon sunlight wrapping around them like a golden coat. A new beginning, a new life, and this time, they wouldn't let anything pull them apart again. 2 years after the tragedy, life had changed completely. The small lakeside house in Vermont had become a true home. Olivia's paintings hung on every wall. The flower pots she planted bloomed brightly in the garden, and laughter had returned, echoing through every room. Olivia opened a small art class for children in the area, and each week she welcomed them with a joy she once thought she'd lost forever. Nathan worked remotely, managing the legitimate businesses he still owned, but he never missed a single family dinner. The mafia boss who once made all of Chicago tremble was now the man who came home on time, cooked even though he still burned things more often than not, and woke up every morning with a smile on his face. One spring morning, as warm sunlight filled the small kitchen, Nathan stood at the stove, trying to fry eggs without burning them. He'd tried hundreds of times over the past 2 years, but somehow his eggs always ended up with a thin black edge around the rim. Soft footsteps sounded on the stairs, and Nathan turned. Olivia was coming down, and in her arms was a little girl, about 14 months old. Bouncy curls of brown hair, clear green eyes like the lake behind their house, and plump cheeks stretched into a wide grin the moment she saw Nathan. Hope, the daughter they had adopted a year earlier from an orphanage in Burlington, a baby left outside a hospital when she was only a few days old, with no one knowing who her birth parents were. A daughter who, the very first moment Olivia saw her, she knew was her daughter. Nathan stepped forward, took Hope from Olivia, and kissed the baby's forehead. "Good morning, Princess. Ready for pancakes?" Hope giggled, her tiny hands reaching up to grab Nathan's hair as she babbled, "Dada." It was the first word Hope had learned, and every time Nathan heard it, his heart melted. He, a man who once killed without blinking, was now completely helpless in the face of a 14-month-old calling him Dada. Olivia stood watching them, a gentle smile on her lips. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, then turned and asked Nathan a question she'd wanted to ask for a long time. "Do you ever miss it? The power, the money, the fear you put into other people?" Nathan looked at Hope, tugging at his hair, then at Olivia, standing by the stove with a mug in her hand, sunlight catching her face like an angel. "That life was empty," he said, his voice quiet and peaceful. "I had everything except what truly mattered." "And what matters?" Olivia asked. Nathan smiled, kissed Hope's cheek, then looked into Olivia's eyes. "This, you, her, a reason to wake up every morning." After breakfast, their little family went out into the backyard. They walked past the flower beds Olivia had planted, followed the narrow stone path, until they stopped beneath the old oak tree at the far end of the yard. Beneath the tree sat a small white marble marker. Carved into it were the words, "Baby Girl Mercer, forever in our hearts." Olivia knelt, placed a fresh flower on the tiny grave, then whispered, "Hello, my love. Mommy and Daddy brought your little sister to visit you. Her name is Hope. You'll always be the big sister in this family, our angel." Nathan stood behind her, one hand resting on Olivia's shoulder, the other holding Hope. He looked up at Vermont's clear blue sky, where white clouds drifted slowly, and he felt peace. Some wounds would never fully heal, but from those wounds, true love could still bloom. Nathan Mercer had once been the darkest shadow Chicago ever feared. Now, standing beside the small grave with his wife and daughter in his arms, he finally understood what real wealth meant. Not money, not power, not an empire, just this, a family worth living for. The end. This story leaves us with many valuable lessons about life. Sometimes we have to lose everything before we realize what truly matters. Money and power can bring admiration from others, but only love and family can bring real happiness. Forgiveness and second chances are the most precious gifts we can give each other. And no matter how harsh life's trials may be, as long as someone is beside us, we can get through them. If this story touched your heart, please press the like button and share the video with the people you love. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss moving stories every day. We'd love to know how you feel about this story. Have you ever lived through moments that felt impossible to survive? Do you believe in second chances in love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear what's in the deepest part of your heart. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a life full of joy and happiness each day, and a spirit that is always calm and at peace. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.